Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so fun to be back here with you, Jeffrey, talking about
Yes.
Chiron and Eris. And this is, we're recording this shortly before the first exact Chiron and Eris conjunction on May 26th. There will be three this year, May 26th, October 8th, and then, I mean, two this year, one next year, March 19th of next year. So we thought it might be fun to start out by looking at how these have come up in the past. And Chiron went in, I mean, Eris went into Aries in the 1920s, early 1920s. So the one in 1917 to 1918 when Chiron was conjunct Eris was in Pisces, the very end of Pisces. And one of the things that's fascinating about that time was it was the entry of the US into World War One, and it was the Spanish flu virus that was around the world. A lot of chaos happening as a result of that, but also opportunity for healing. Anything
Right,
you
because
want
there was
to?
also the response, the initial idea of what eventually became the United Nations, the League of Nations, and these resolutions, well, we'll never have a great war again. And so these are kind of some of the dual themes. It wasn't just chaos. There was how do we resolve that shamanically? Anyway, go on. Just wanted to
Yeah,
insert.
yeah. So anyway, that wasn't in Aries, that was in Pisces. And then in 1971, May 30th, just 4 days after the one that we're having this time, was the first Chiron conjunct Eris around 13 degrees Aries, and then September 7th and March 19th. And you can see that the dates tend to be somewhat close, like they tend to be around the same time of the year when they come back together 54 years later. And so in 1971, we were, of course, involved in the Vietnam War. What is this
Right.
with the war? Right? There were a lot of tech things happening. The first microprocessor, the first arcade video game, the first email that was sent by the government. So a lot of techie kinds of things happening. And then there were a couple things that you were mentioning,
Yeah,
Jeffrey.
yeah. I mean, some of those things were all behind the scenes, but a big one of the big shifts, which sounds kind of boring, but we went off of the gold standard. We had the United States was pegging the dollar to $35 an ounce for gold, and there was a lot of speculation, and there were trade imbalances and all of that kind of stuff going on, and it was a big concern. And so they previous administrations to Nixon had tried to make adjustments, and they weren't working very well. And so there was a conference, and they got all together, and they went, well, we need to just end trying to peg our currency to a fixed point. And so that began the whole the kind of the current system where currencies float in valuation according to the strength of a country's economy and the speculation and all that that still goes on. That's huge. That was a huge change in the economic structure. And while it was kind of coming out of a somewhat chaotic situation, it had created its new chaos. But it's an example of how Chiron, together with Eris, Eris is representing a chaotic situation that comes from strife and discord, things not being right. I think Eris tends to bring up the circumstances where we need to go beyond the status quo for whatever reason. And um, and initially, that breaking down of the status quo can be chaotic. And but out of that process, can something new can be born. And if we involve Chiron with its that shamanic energy, that process of using specialized knowledge or by working through the wounds towards uh, elevating one's consciousness when it's on an individual basis and then applying it to others compassionately. That's the energy of Chiron. Whether we can say that that's what they were really doing back in 1971 is another question. they
Well,
were
they
kind of
want to
doing
be
it for
able to print
themselves.
money and not have to have the gold to back it up.
That's basically it, because
Right?
we didn't have enough gold in Fort Knox to back it up.
Right. To back up the amount of money they were printing. So I was like, eh, let's just do away with the gold standard.
Right,
But it is interesting to consider. Here we are in 2025, and the thing that's big on the world stage is cryptocurrency going more digital, and that, getting away from paper dollars. And, then we had credit cards, which was also, so you didn't even have to carry cash anymore. So it's been like there's this evolution. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all manifests over the next few
right.
years because we can see what happened since 1971 to now. There's been such a massive shift in how we do money. How
And
now we have
and
Venmo and Zelle and PayPal and
right. And it's a shift in consciousness or awareness if you think about it, because there were a lot of people who were like, "Oh, what do you mean I can't have the gold? I mean, I need gold." And then it just shifted to no, it's dollars, and the value doesn't, is according to what's going on in the
right,
market. And now we're
right.
going even further away from a physical representation. And yeah, it's in, as we
And
know,
what
it's
a
moving a
dollar
lot in
was
the
worth
West.
back in 1971 is very different than what a dollar is worth in 2025. Like it's cents on the dollar, it's like hardly a dollar isn't worth hardly anything anymore because of the inflation that's happened. So
Right.
it's just interesting to see how some of these things have played out, like you were saying. And then, and here we are in 2025, with a lot of world chaos, especially around the financial situation. The stock market's been wild, people not
Mm,
knowing
right.
what's going to happen, and there's a lot of speculation and a lot of fear and a lot of those challenges. And if we think about it, I always think that if we look at Chiron as an underworld planet, this is where we get to face our fears, and Eris is the one who's going to put a spotlight on that and how
Yeah.
they work together around that. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next year and years. And they will never come back together in Aries again. So the last time they come together is March 19th of 2026. And then Chiron in 2026 is going to go into Gemini, I mean into Taurus, and it's going to zip back and forth between Taurus and Aries for a little while. And by 2027, it'll be permanently in Taurus. And it doesn't come back to Aries until 2068. And by then, when Chiron comes back into Aries, Eris will have moved into Taurus and will be there. So it wouldn't be till Chiron got to Taurus that it would catch up to Eris again, and that'll be 54 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, going back to just a couple more things to add a little more flavor to the idea of, well, what's happening. Obviously, there were lots of things going on in any given year that can be, strife or discord. But when we're specifically looking at what happens with Chiron in the mix, and how do things get advanced or not, and and also we'll add the context of when it's in Aries, when it's about identity and who are we and how are we putting ourselves out into the world, because in those early 70s, as we know, there was a lot of uh, push for people wanting to establish, whether it was the American Indian movement. They had been in existence for a little while, but American Indian movement that was amping up. The women's movement was amplifying the whole earth, you know, take care of the earth was being amplified. Lots of important laws were passed, and Earth Day. So there was a lot of those things that we could say were about, there's a situation that is, discord and strife, and there is chaos, and how are we trying to resolve that in ideally making it better for everyone. But those are some of the themes that uh what was that I don't know that this fits in exactly with that energy, but the Pentagon Papers were released at that time showing that there was um, hypocrisy from our government. And Eris likes to point out hypocrisy too. So,
Yes, it does. Yes, and so for those of you who might not be familiar, Jeffrey and I did a video on this before, and we'll put the link to the show notes to the previous video. But we talked a lot about that and how she's not invited, and she creates a whole disruption and chaos based on that. And so we want to stay aware of what's our how are we having a healthy personal identity? What do we need to heal within ourselves so that we have a healthy personal identity? And then that we can then support having a greater, like, I don't know, planetary identity, like where we're taking care of the planet and we're honoring life as sacred. Feels like that's perhaps a possibility, especially if we look back in the 70s and we see all the stuff that was going on around protesting things that they didn't like the Vietnam War, and or creating, like you said, Earth Day, and so many different things that were happening at that time, bringing greater awareness. I remember I was in high school at the time, and I read a book on trying to think something that was about planet Earth, and basically how if we didn't take care of it now, we were going to be in trouble down the road. And so,
well,
so there's a
I
lot
mean,
of awareness at that time.
I didn't intend to talk about this, but 1971 is when I had my near-death experience. So I was literally in the underworld having a Chiron initiation. And
Wow.
that was one of the central themes was the planet is going through these radical changes. And if we don't start taking care of it better, and ironically, this is 2025 was one of the indications of when things will be so different you won't recognize it. And the idea of fires and things like that. So I didn't, like I said, I didn't, that's like a whole other topic. But I
Right?
was like, oh yeah,
But hey, we
personally,
need to
that
take care
happened
of our planet.
1971.
Part of the healing process, taking care of our planet, taking care of ourselves and taking care of the planet. So,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, those were some significant themes along with other world events that were going on in 1971 and 72. Basically, those were some powerful things. Do we want to say anything more about that before we move?
I feel pretty complete around
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're looking at the chart for May 26th when the exact conjunction's happening around 5 a.m. And there's also going to be a Venus Moon conjunction that day at the third eye chakra gate, meaning new visions, new possibilities, or letting go of the things that are in the way of us having new visions and possibilities. Is probably a
Yeah.
better way to say it. That'll happen later that day. And of course, Venus is very getting ready to come up and be exact with the whole thing, Chiron and Eris. I think by June 1st, Venus is going to be at the
Yeah.
25 degrees mark.
Yeah. I
So
believe
a
that's right.
lot going on. But most important, as you were pointing out, Jeffrey, is Saturn has just gone into Aries. And so you want to say more about that?
Sure. Well, Saturn and Aries, again, if we kind of look back historically, the last time it did that, 96, 97, there were a number of things that are represented. But let's talk about the energy for a moment, which is Saturn and Aries can be taking a lead to structure new things. And those new things can be with the higher vibration of Aries to restore justice in the world, can protect people, et cetera, et cetera. But it can also represent on a lower vibrational level the imposition of a structure of one own individual, their belief on how things should be. And in 96, 97, we had the resolution of the Balkan Wars, which established a new order and resolved, these issues of the ethnic cleansing and all the horrors of that. But we also had not far away, the establishment of the Taliban in taking power in Afghanistan and imposing, these really strict and brutal Islamic law on other people. So, you know, Saturn and Aries can represent, we're going to start creating new structures that establishes, individually for a moment, because what structures can we establish for our own identity that supports ourselves in our own authority? And and then extending that to, but how do we do that in a way that maintains the protection and justice for the whole world? And if you're looking at nations, they can, yeah, they can either try to impose their authority on them and what they're on others and their belief systems, or be creating these new structures that are involving all people. So other interesting things that happened in 96, 97 that seems, kind of unrelated to the politics, but it profoundly changed our way of thinking, was the first publication of Harry Potter. And we were talking about that, but just a minute ago, because you read it to your kids, right?
Yes, I did.
And that, I mean, it brought a whole new idea of, reimagining the world as the potential for a magical world, and introduced that whole generation, well, all of us really, but especially that generation, to the idea that we can go beyond the ordinary. And well, there are other planetary factors involved with that. Pluto in Aries and I'm sorry, Pluto in
Dad.
Sag and Uranus in Aquarius. But in terms of setting up a new order, that's Saturn, and that's a new way of thinking about reality. So that was 96. So if we start looking at a variety of possibilities now, when the other thing that we've noticed, all of us astrologers really, but these ingresses, there's been a lot of new ingresses of especially the outer planets. And there's a lot of, you know, uh, people get all excited about it, but particularly with these outer slow moving planets, it's not like night and day. When Aquarius moved, I'm sorry, Pluto moved into Aquarius, people are going, well, it's the beginning of the Aquarian age. And it was like, yeah, but, this day feels a lot like the previous day. So I'm not so sure. But we notice these trends going on. But it's Pluto. And so it's going to be hidden. And the first elements are going to be the power struggles that are going to happen. Are people going to be more empowered, or are those in power going to have more control over people? There's that stuff. And Neptune the same way. Neptune has been in Aries now for just what, a few weeks. But have we noticed a lot yet? And the last time Neptune was in Aries, moved into Aries, we in the United States had a civil war where we fought over a belief system. And that's a potential. But it's really about coming to awareness of how does your belief system and who are you? That Aries, what is your identity? And we chose to end slavery and to stay together as a union. Well, we didn't choose that. We had to fight for it. So I'm
Very
not
Aries
saying that
that
that's
way.
what's in the cards now, but it could be.
Yeah.
But when Saturn gets there, it's a different story. Saturn is about in this dimension. It's about bringing things from those other dimensions into the reality. So we're being tasked as a nation, as a world, and as individuals to restructuring, having more authority over our own identities. And can we do that in a way that is just for everyone?
And
So
when Neptune was in Aries back in the 1860s, I guess it was, I think. And then Saturn wasn't in Aries, and Chiron and Eris probably weren't in Aries. I know we know Eris wasn't for sure, but I don't think Chiron was. And then and Saturn was probably not in Aries. And so we have this coming together now of these longer cycles, Chiron's 50-year cycle, Eris's 560-year cycle,
Yeah.
Saturn's 30-year cycle, Neptune's 165-year cycle, all in Aries. And basically saying that this is a time to create a new healthy identity. It's not about power over others, but how do we come together to create a new reality where everyone gets to be who they are? We're not trying to dominate, control, manipulate,
Right.
and make sure that people are doing it the way we want them to do it, like the Taliban were doing to their people. It's like we have a religious perspective, and you all need to do this, and if you don't, then we're taking you out, basically. Coming back to this idea that everyone can have their individual expression, and ideally that there's a way that it can all work together, that we can all work together to support one another to be in, an abundant, loving, kind, caring universe or
Yes.
planet.
Right. And and you know, there's going to be, I got a couple of comments to add on to that, but one of them is that we do know they're going to retrograde back into Pisces briefly. So it's going to be we're going to have this first flush where we're going to become more aware. Well, what kinds of things are being brought into our real world, and how is authority being used, etc. But the imagining when we're going to go back into it's almost like, going up on the hill, as we say in the native way, to be go on the hill for vision quest. There's an opportunity to go back to look at the whole universe of ideas in Pisces, and then can bring them back into a reality. So it's it, that's coming over the next year. Uh,
Yeah,
but the other thing is that Chiron asks us or compels us to deal with the wounding in a way that benefits us all and is expressed with compassion. We don't ever get past our wound, whatever that might be, until we stop identifying with the wound, but rather the sacred knowledge, or it can be sacred knowledge, whatever that knowledge that it gives us, and how we apply it to others. So if Eris is pointing out where there's strife and discord, and strife is striving also to be a better person, to be a better nation, to be a better world.
yeah.
And it seems like it's chaotic, but where can we as individuals, as we're experiencing this and being challenged every day, because our world really, not just the outer world, is maybe we're not seeing a lot of disruption there yet, although there's plenty. Where it's really happening
There's
is the
plenty.
whole, yeah, right. But it's the scaffolding of everything that we believed that is kind of being broken down, what we based it on, that whole collective unconscious, and which is where the idea of collective soul, or what are we drawing on, what are we going to bring forward. And a lot of the old things, just like, when the gold standard disappears, some people freaked out. But, and there's
And here we
some,
are, 54 years later, and then we're still here.
yeah, exactly. So a key thing is, let's not, it seems like we should panic, and we may need to take on challenges where we really need to, but it's really calling on us and as individuals to get focused on what we need to do to maintain our own authority as individuals, and progress that and share that with the world, and not go into the fear that is coming out of this um destruction at the invisible level. I don't even know if there's a better word than destruction, because it's
I think that
more,
works.
huh?
It works. Destruction works.
It it works. Although, I mean, I've kind of likened it more recently to the whole notion that, when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, it just turns into mush and DNA, and then it reemerges as something new. And it's a little bit more like that. The chaos that we're going to be going through these next several years, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pain and there's going to be a lot of difficulty. Yeah, I mean, it just is. But the possibilities beyond that and how we can focus on that is that's where we need to stay as best we can, and whether we can within groups where we're connecting to others, connecting to heart, connecting to the earth, and you know sharing who we are, then we can shamanically shift that chaos and that strife and discord into a better world.
I
So
love the imagery of the caterpillar dissolving. And also another imagery, if we're thinking about Saturn and building a new way of being, restructuring, you have to tear down the old house before you can build the new one. So and that's work. That takes some work,
it's work.
and it helps if we can begin to start tuning into what's the new house going to look like? What's the new structure going to look like? What is it that we want to co-create together? How are we going to show up and create a world where it's safe for everyone to be who they are? Because that is the essence of Aries. How do we create the safe space? I often like to think of Aries as was the original midwives. They did not help women give birth. They created a safe space for women to give birth because women
Ah,
could know how to give birth themselves. They didn't need help, but they did need to be safe because they're vulnerable while they're giving birth. So how are we creating a way to make it safe so for us to birth something new in our within ourselves and within our greater reality?
that's
So
beautiful. I love that.
Chiron and oh, thank you. Chiron and Aries, Eris and Aries are coming to, it's like, how are they, what does it take to create the new world, how to create beauty out of chaos, as it says here. Like, I love that idea of that we're going to create a new way of experiencing beauty out of all of this chaos. So,
I think
any
one
last words from
one
you?
final example, one final thought about it is that, I mean, here we are in our in the northern hemisphere, in the Northland, actually, where spring is there we just leafed out in the last few days, but it's the example of the plant is so Aries in as much as it just grows. It pushes up through the soil and through the leaves and through the crack in the sidewalk, and it grows. And it just is about being itself and taking in those resources and moving towards the bloom. And I think, that too is a good metaphor when we feel like we've lost a, a way. It's keep growing, keep being yourself, and keep in mind that we all have a gift to give, and together we're going to be collectively creating a better world.
Yes, I love that. Oh my gosh. So thank you everyone for watching. We're going to do another part three down the road because there's so much more to talk about this and things that are continuing to unfold and come into our awareness. And also we have a couple more exact Chiron Eris conjunctions coming up in October and March of next year. So it'll be interesting to watch how this is playing out and how are we engaging with this energy. And also check out the show notes for the first video that we did on this, and there may be some other links there that you might find helpful. So,
One
yeah,
last thing, I think that even though we're going to have several conjunctions, and we stated that these are big movements of the planets and therefore of our own the archetypes within us, I kind of feel drawn to do a some kind of ceremony on that day that has to do with, where are we going shamanically with the chaos we're experiencing. And like you said, there's multiple things. It's a new moon, it's the Venus cycle, and those are all really powerful points. So keep an
it's a
eye
new
out. I'll
moon
try to put
super
something out.
close to the Earth, so having a bigger impact. It's called a supermoon. but it's a perigee moon, meaning it's really close to the Earth. And it's an out of bounds moon, meaning it's outside the boundaries of our ordinary reality. And it's in Gemini, which is also doesn't like to play by the rules, whatever the rules have been. And Chiron and Eris together exact on May 26th. This is powerful, and I love that you said that. So people can tune in and create their own ceremony. It's like, how are we going to go beyond, it's like Gemini would say, just leap empty-handed into the void.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just trust that it's all going to unfold in the best way possible,
Yeah.
and that the old rules and everything are just what's holding us back. So how do we take that trickster energy and have it work for us so that we're able to move into that new territory
Yeah.
on a new moon, no less.
Right.
So
Yeah. The Fool card in tarot. Yeah, that's
and there's maybe no fool because the fool knows that gravity doesn't affect them and that they're leaping into something that is going to be more amazing than they could imagine, but they don't know what it is. They're just
right.
trusting.
Right.
Yeah. So that's
All right.
awesome.
Well, that's wonderful. Thanks everybody for listening in and watching, and we hope you find some good out of this, and we'll look for you next time.
We'll be back.
Bye.
Bye.